Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Salesforce. In a moment, I'm going to hand you over to Julio, who's going to run today's session. But before I do, just a quick reminder that today's webinar is going to be recorded, and the recording will be made available to all of you within 1 week of the session. We encourage you all to ask as many questions as you like using both our Q&A and chat function. And in addition, there will be a number of resources made available to you throughout the presentation. And again, you'll be able to find these in the chat. So without further ado, I'm going to pass straight over to Julio, and I hope you'll all enjoy today's session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abby. So let me share my screen quickly, and that's it. Okay, so thank you very much, Abby, and good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us today in that session that we name it Navigating the Changes and Trends that are Reshaping the Business School Industry. So let me briefly introduce myself. So my name is Julio Villalobos. I am the CXO Industry Advisor for Education at EMEA for Salesforce.org. And basically, my role is to help our teams in Salesforce to have a better understanding of our industry. So by having a better understanding of our industry, we can provide better outcomes for our customers. My knowledge of the industry is very important to deliver my role properly, and it comes from either from my experience as an executive, being the CMO, CDO, and the Chief Corporate Officer on a SADE business school, plus being during more than 20 years a digital strategy professor in several top worldwide business schools. So once being said that, I want to start saying thank you. Thank you for allocating time to be here today with us. We understand and we really appreciate those times are very difficult because we are working anytime, anywhere. So thanks for allocating that 1 hour to share our knowledge and your questions on that industry challenges and opportunities. So let me briefly introduce you Education Cloud from Salesforce. As you know, on Salesforce, we are organized by industries, and one of our major concerns industry is education. So what we do is we adapt our solution to the specific needs on the education industry, and that's called Education Cloud, either on the major challenges areas that the education industry has, like recruitment and admissions, student experience, advancement and alumni engagement, and institution operations. Basically, because by having Education Cloud, we move from a simplifying data complexity across all the institutions and moving away from those silos that in our industry are very typical and they're disconnecting to the student experience. And we are very happy that we work worldwide on education. We have more than 6,000 customers all over the world, and all typical, all classes, all formats of education institution. We have private institutions, we have public institutions, we have university, we have business schools, we have all kinds of institutions that we are helping through the Education Cloud to have this unified student experience. So to use like a kind of icebreaker for the session, we are going to pull to bring up a poll so to understand which is the biggest focus area within your business school. So is it going to be live learning? Is it going to be rankings, student success, sustainability, or well-being? So we are going to launch a poll. So feel free to pick which is the most important and relevant one for you. And then we will give like 10-15 seconds to fill up the survey, and we will share the answers to that. So, Abby, can we share the answers?
Can you see them?
Okay, it looks like there is some kind of problems showing the answers. Definitely, what we can do, Abby, is share them in the text box, and we can comment it later on. So we keep moving on the session. Okay, so yeah, so as we name it, the session is called "The Trends That Are Reshaping the Business Schools Industry." And one of the first trends that we see and we want to talk today, it's about lifelong learning. So let me bring up these 3 stats that they came from the Salesforce Connected Student Report that we launched recently. And now I'm going to go on top of them, and I use them as an introduction of lifelong learning. They said 30% of MBA graduates have accessed lifelong learning post-MBA from their own business school. So that really gives us, there is 30% of people that are already doing that, but there is also a huge opportunity on the other 70% of them. Second stat is 32% of MBA alumni who had taken part in postgraduate lifelong learning opportunities from business schools said they were either very satisfied with what they had complete or attended. So gives us, we are starting doing well on lifelong learning, but still we do have a room for improvement. And finally, 71% of our MBA graduates polled were either very satisfied or fairly satisfied with the impact of their MBAs had on their careers to date, despite their requirements for ongoing learning and development. So that gives us a clear view that lifelong learning, it's a need. So it's not, it has no more sense that studying a unique time, an MBA, and then don't doing anything else. So we need on that lifelong learning activity along our professional career. So let me introduce you to talk about lifelong learning to Elin Borabek. Elin Borabek is the CIO of BI Norwegian Business School. BI Norwegian Business School is the biggest and largest private business school in Norway. And Elin, it's besides being the CIO of that business school, she belongs to the top management team, and she's been one of the responsibles, I would say the most responsible person on doing the digital transformation process along all the business school, having that 360-degree view on her mind. And prior to being on BI Business School, Elin has been 17 years on the telecom industry. So welcome, Elin. How are you?
Thank you, Julio. I'm fine, thank you. Glad to be here.
Okay, so thank you very much. So is it okay if we talk during just the next 10 minutes about lifelong learning and how you implement lifelong learning on BI? So let me start, which do you think are the major challenges, and connected to the challenges, there are always opportunities on lifelong learning?
I think one of the main challenges that we see is of course increased competition in the lifelong learning or executive education, as we call it, markets, and that goes to both the international competition and the national competition as well. Most of our students experienced in the lifelong learning segments, they are Norwegians. And they know BI. We have a good brand in Norway, but of course international also for our market. We can't compare to Harvard or INSEAD or really the top schools. So in terms of what we've learned during the pandemic when it comes to digitalization, we also see that we face increased international competition, although we have a pretty much national market. And in Norway, higher education is really free. So we compete, and we're a private business school with tuition. So we compete against a free product, and our government has given the public universities sort of a marching order to expand their offerings into lifelong learning. So the competition is one of the key challenges. In terms of facing the international competition, especially, we see that the executive students really want a combination of digital offerings and physical offerings at campus to discuss with other students and really to in a classroom setting. So we're concerned, but we think that we can provide an extra value there. So that's one of the challenges. Another challenge is, of course, that the executive students, as we call them, are extremely concerned about relevance. They want their lifelong learning experience to be relevant in terms of their careers, meeting their career goals, getting a promotion. So relevance is extremely important. And of course, we are a research-based business school. And research is relevant, but we need to be connected to the business in terms of making the offerings really relevant as well. And I think the third thing that I would choose to discuss is we see that the faculty teaching the executive students need slightly different skill sets. The student body is somewhat different from full-time younger students. And it requires some special training and the slightly different skill sets to kind of really deliver and succeed in that market. So we are developing really a training course for faculty who wants to move into that segment.
Yeah, great. So let me summarize what you just mentioned. You said you change not only national but international students. So then you need to have that on your mind when you are approaching them. You said you need to develop a lifelong learning connected to the society or to workforce. So what they're looking for. And finally, you mentioned about skills, not only which kind of skills you need to teach, but how do you need to prepare your professors to have those new abilities or skills to teach on that online and hybrid ecosystem. That more like, yeah, great. So let me say, which are if you could say, like, which are the key top actions that you have implemented on BI towards lifelong learning? Which will be like the three main top actions that you have implemented?
Well, the first thing goes, we need to attract the students, of course, and we need to work with our alumni and other and we really need to know the students and use the data that we have about the students to target the offerings. Because the relevance is so important, we need to be sure that our offerings are really relevant to the different segments. So that's one area where we've implemented Salesforce, which is probably why you invited me, which is one of the key actions that we have taken. And as I also briefly mentioned, we are developing sort of a training program or a course for faculty wanting to move into the executive segment. In order to get a broader, in order to be able to kind of expand into more research topics or more topics, so to expand it, and of course making sure that the offerings, both digital and physical, are connected and make the experience. The several parts of the whole, making sure that the teaching experience is what they expect. I think that's the main actions that we've taken.
Right. I think thanks. That sure gives to our audience a good roadmap to implement lifelong learning. So, how important do you think technology is connected to implementing a good lifelong learning project or business unit or initiative on your school?
Well, I think it's extremely important, because what we see is that in the lifelong learning context, the learners need to be able to combine the learning with having a family, with having a job. So the time they spend on the learning has to be really efficient, and the digital tools that we've grown accustomed to during the pandemic is really an important part of that. So it's extremely important, and of course the quality needs to be top notch for this segment.
Yeah, you mentioned that when you implement lifelong learning, you implement it in a hybrid form. No,
Yeah.
You said there are some things that it should be taught online, that maybe it can be taught better online, but there are things that need to be taught in class. So what do you think? Because technology, it's clearly very helpful when you're teaching online, but how do you think also technology may help when you have your students on class, on that lifelong learning?
Well, what we've seen is that will of course depend on the subject taught and how the faculty involved is accustomed to using technology, and there are so many things out there you can use. The one thing that we do see, and this is of course especially connected to the pandemic again, is that all our students, they're not allowed to travel to campus by their employers. So in addition to, they really should be there to get the best learning experience, but not everyone's able to. So to stream and distribute the sessions digitally it's an important it's important for those who are not able to be there. So although it's the hybrid and the combination that really gives the best experience, it's important that we have technology to offer a solution to those not being able to attend.
Yeah, and how you said, Ellen, that having a single source of truth of data, having a good data strategy, or having a good data, it's connected to lifelong to implement a good lifelong learning project.
I think it's extremely important because, as you said, or as I said earlier, you need to be able to target the offerings to the students to a much higher degree than you need for the full-time market, really, because the relevance is absolutely so important. So to attract the students, you really need to know what they want to achieve and what their interests are and what their needs are, and in order to do that, you need data. And to improve the offerings, to know what works, what doesn't work, what's good with hybrid, what should be improved, etc. You need the data. So the data can be used really on all levels of the lifelong learning process.
Yeah, I don't know if you agree what I'm going to say, because we heard many times that data is the new petrol from 2020 to the 21st century. But I would say we all have data. The problem is having a good data. So the difference of having good, accurate and data instead of having just data.
Yes, and you need to have the relevant data, of course.
Yeah, relevant data. So you can personalize, you can create, automatize, and you can predictability. And very just to end our that first part of our conversation, very tough question. So how you measure success on lifelong learning on BI, Norwegian Business School? Which are the three KPIs, or which KPIs would you suggest to our audience to track?
I think what we currently track is, of course, the financials. Do we attract enough students, etc., and the student feedback. But there are several other things you could track. You could track is the student returning for another program. There are of course boundaries to what you can do with data, but due to GDPR and data protection and everything. But of course, I think the success criteria is really, do the students really succeed in their working life? Do our education help them to achieve their goals outside? And so there are probably a lot of interesting KPIs you could develop depending on the data.
So thank you very much, Celine. So thanks. That's the first part we wanted to talk about lifelong learning. Now, thank you very much. I will bring you out later on to do some like a conversation together with Andrew. So let me pull back my slides, and then we are going to move to student success. And I'm going to move to student success, introducing these 3 stats that once again they came from the Salesforce Connected student report. They talk about 27% of the students say they can sign up for an advising appointment easily at their college or university. So that's an important percentage of students. But if we see the other side of the coin, there's almost more than 60% that they are not recognizing that, and that give us a clear opportunity. Second stat, 26% of the students say they have to sign into 2 or more different platforms to find answers to their questions and access the resource they need to be successful every day. So this is a clear result of working on silos and having a legacy of different platforms. And students, they want to have a unique place where they can get all the resources. And the final stats, 92% of the staff, say tailored students enrollment plans have been very successful in ensuring accepted students enroll at the university of college or colleges. So that's connected very well with the efficiency. So just using that stats to introduce the student success concept, but I want to introduce Andrew Collins Tran. He's the president on the Dublin Business School, and he's been there since 2013. And prior to being on the Dublin Business School, he's been also has a huge experience either on the education side and on the corporate side. So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Julia.
Okay, so are you ready to have like a 10-minute conversation about the student success?
Sure, happy to do that.
Great. So I'm going to be questions are going to be very similar from what I have done to Ellen. So first thing, which are the major challenges, and connected to the challenges, the opportunities you see we are facing on the student success, either on our industry, in higher education industry?
I suppose in starting to talk about the challenges and the opportunities, I think the first thing we need to do, or certainly we have started to do here, is to define what we mean by student success, because there are probably different definitions depending on who you're talking to, or maybe even student success at different times in the student journey can be defined differently. But to try to be simple about it, and I think an awful lot of this stuff is simple. There's no rocket science involved in this at all. The definition of student success has to be the academic outcome, or the achievement of the academic outcome, and the achievement of the graduate outcome that comes from that, whether that is moving on to further education or on to employment or moving up in your career. And then I suppose going with that is the whole concept of the experience, and an enjoyable experience in itself. So if that's around the definition, then we can get into what needs to be done to try to achieve that. And it does really start with the experience. And what we have found here is, we have a college of about 8,000 students here. So we will have a large number of them that will be on single year programs like master's programs, but we have a large number as well that come straight in from school into the first year of their undergraduate program. And what we have found with students coming in from school, they're young, clearly. It's their first time away from home in many cases, and it's a change of learning environment from the school learning environment to the freer higher education environment. So it can take a little bit of time for students to become rooted in their new higher education experience. So we have found, and we're not unique in this, but we have found that probably that first month or 6 weeks or 2 months is a critical time for the students to become rooted in their new education experience. So we have to do things, and we do things that helps them to get rooted. And that's going to be in the provision of information, communicating with them frequently, ensuring that there are no administration hurdles along the way, just that makes that transition from school into college easier. And we as well, we endeavor to try to do things that they can slip in and out of. You know, you asked me here about the challenges. If we just talk about the challenges for the student, we probably need to make sure that there are very few challenges for students in the first couple of months of their time in college. So if you were to look at some other challenges from us in terms of providing a good student experience and endeavoring to achieve good success for the student, I suppose the opportunities are probably around data. And with a higher education environment, there is a very large volume of data. You could almost call it transactional data arising from a student doing or not doing certain things. So there's going to be data on attendance in the classroom, the physical classroom, or attendance online, or accessing the virtual learning environment, which in our case is Moodle. And even within that, you can break it down to uploading assessments, accessing library services, whatever it might be. So there's data available on all of these transactions or elements of transactions. And that's the opportunity that exists there. And then the challenges, I suppose, that go with that is how you get that data easily out of your information system, how you use that data. At times, there's so much data in there. You know, you could open the door and draw a report out with all this data, but what's relevant, what's useful, what's not useful. So how do you discern what's in there? That's certainly a challenge. But in terms of the opportunities, I suppose, as well, there is being able to use that data to identify students who are at risk. And I think that's the key challenge here. And indeed the opportunity, but the key challenge is identifying those students who need some type of an intervention. Some interventions will be one-to-one. So, you know, you have a particular difficulty in settling into college, you need some type of holistic support and intervention. Others can be, you know, one-to-many, where you may be one of a number of people who have difficulty just in one thing. So you're in a maths related subject, but you have some difficulty with numeracy. Or you know, you're finding it very difficult to adjust to academic learning, or maybe you have a difficulty with academic writing. So those things are different. But the challenges there are in using the data, and from that being able to create the opportunity of identifying those students at risk and putting in place the interventions that are needed around that. So, you know, I've rambled a little bit there, but that'll be a sense of the challenges and the opportunities that I would see.
One specific question. So how do you think that implementing a correct or good student success based on the academic outcome and the experience, you name it, has changed in a physical campus system from a hybrid campus system in which we definitely are, all of us now?
Yeah, well, it certainly has changed. There's no question of that at all. And if we go back to pre-COVID times, which would be going back to, let's say, up to and including the full year 2019. So in that period of time, the data that we had available was data from physical attendance in the classroom, accessing Moodle, physical attendance in the library, and some other things like that, probably physical attendance at an examination. And of course, all of that moved online from about March 2020 onwards, and still remains online, not totally online. In our case, we're a hybrid, where some students are in the classroom and students online simultaneously. When we had to go into lockdown in March 2020, and all of our students moved almost in an instant from classroom to online, the challenge that we had there was trying to keep engagement. And I mean engagement probably in the broadest sense. So students were quite happy to join their class online, do their class, submit their assignments, do whatever they did. But it was that broader cohesive cultural piece that really began to suffer after a while. So if you take any of our students, I've talked about the school leaver coming into college, but take any of our students, you know, say the likes of me, who might be an adult learner in the evening from home. Because of the whole changed environment that COVID brought, and from a higher education point of view, all of that moved online. There was a new distance that was created between the student or the learner and the college. What we did, we could see this quite quickly, and what we did was, through our student experience team, to try to create reasons to engage with students. So for the younger full-time student, we created online events to try to draw them into it. And we did a real blunderbuss approach. We ran an awful lot of events in the hopes that all students would go to one or more of them. So it wasn't that they were particularly targeted. But then we did a little bit of targeting as well on students in certain disciplines, where we would have run events for particular disciplines, like a psychology event or an analytics event or whatever it might be. But we had to do all of those things and be almost incessant in how we did it. You just keep going and contacting the students and finding creating any kind of an opportunity online to try to get the student to interact with us. What we found as well during that time is that there was, after probably 3 or 4 months, there was an increase in the mental health supports that students required. And we just ensure that we made supports available, albeit that they were online, and just kept encouraging students through the student experience team and through the lecturing team to tell students, if you need help, if you need support, here's where you go. Don't feel alone, don't be on your own, whatever it might be. But those challenges from moving online, they certainly existed. But I do think they're probably balanced by an increase in flexibility that has emerged, or a demand for flexibility that has emerged in how students learn and participate in higher education.
Great. So, and how I really like that final part that you are concerned, because now studying in a hybrid system where you study every time, everywhere, anytime, anywhere, it's going to be very stressing. And so being care of the well-being from students, professors, and staff, I think it's one of the challenges that we do have as an industry. So let me ask you, before bringing in Ellen, if you have to measure student success, which will be your suggested KPIs? So how does it look success on a student success?
I think a little bit like what Ellen had said, there are some very hard measures of student success. And while Ellen made reference to financial success or financial outcomes for the institution, I think from a student success point of view, the first one is an academic outcome. So student success will firstly be measured by the level of academic attainment and academic achievement. And again, being simple about it, that can be measured by exam pass rates, module pass rates, and program pass rates, or the year on a program pass rates. So that would be the first one for us anyway. There's a few things that can be hidden within there. So exam pass rates assumes that somebody sits an exam. So one of the hidden measures in there is around the number of people who stay on course over the course of a semester or a year, or whatever the duration of the program is. So we look at the pass rate against enrollments, not just the pass rate against exams sat. So that identifies where students may have dropped out along the way. Of course, if we're using the data and mechanisms that I've spoken about earlier, then we'll have identified those students at risk and have done something about them. But there is that piece around maintaining enrollment. And the next one we look at is progression to the next stage of a program. So you can pass all of your exams, but you may not progress to the next stage. And if you don't, that is, there's a question mark over us as to why didn't we enable or facilitate you to move on to the next stage of the program with us if you pass the exams. And then the last hard one, I suppose, is also around the graduate outcome. So did the student, having been successful in their academic endeavors, did they progress to further education or to employment, as the case may be? So they would be 3 or 4 quite hard measures, or they're based on hard factual data. Then there's some opinion data that we would add to that as well. So there's the satisfaction level of students with the experience that they have had on a particular module or a program. And we would measure that twice a year, or assuming it's a 2-semester program. And then the last thing that we measure quarterly, which again is opinion based, is the Net Promoter Score. So will the student recommend us to a friend? And that is a very harsh and a little bit of a crude measure, but when you're consistently measuring that quarter on quarter on quarter, you can see trends emerging on how students perceive the experience that they have had. So there's a mix of the hard factual stuff and the opinion stuff.
So thank you very much, Andrew. I think it has been a very, very interesting insight. So I'm going to call Ellen if he can jump in, and we can do like a free colleagues conversation. Thanks, Ellen. So we mentioned several times, this is not anymore a linear process. This is going to be like a round robin. So you are not studying once and then you stop. And that's very well connected to lifelong learning and to student success. So Ellen, how do you think, or how it's lifelong learning impacting on student success on BI?
Lifelong learning and student success.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that in terms of student success, we see that, of course, when we look at the full-time market here, we look at really the same measures as Andrew does, and student dropouts numbers and the academic achievements, etc. But when it comes to the executive market, the executive student buys one course often, not a degree to the same extent. You can build a degree by buying multiple courses, but students and they rarely drop out of the class. they normally pass. So student success in terms of lifelong learning is really more about whether this program that we are offering helps you to achieve your professional goals.
Okay.
Which is harder to measure because we don't really have those data.
Right. So we mentioned before in both conversations about the new profiles. So we are probably having digital native profiles, and we are having international profiles that we are not used to them in the last 20 years, so they are new. But let me introduce a new kind of profiles, and I would like to know how either you, Andrew, and Ellen are approaching those new profiles in terms of student success and lifelong learning. And this is the B2B industry, or the B2B customer. So we were born to provide value or success to students, and now many of the universities and business schools, they are also providing value and academic knowledge to companies and to corporations and to B2B. So Andrew, how are you doing on Dublin Business School, all that strategy of facing the B2B customer, and how do you track or implement student success on B2B?
It's an interesting question in the context of a higher education institution like ours, because the institution is built upon delivery in a B2C model rather than a B2B model. But of course, we have quite a number of business clients and corporate customers, and there are 2 types of products that they will have purchased from us. One is where there may be a bespoke product, where we will develop a leadership program, for instance, with them for delivery to to an internal group of employees. So that's customized, that's bespoke, and that's one particular type of product. Then the other product is where a business customer will very simply place their employees on our programs, quite simply as learners and as students. So if we go back to your question around student success in the context of B2B, So where we have learners on a course who happen to have that course paid for by their employer, we just treat them like a regular customer. And student success is still very much exactly as we described here. It is the academic outcome, it is retention on the program, it is progression to the next stage, and so forth. And we would not want to do anything different there. We would not want the employer to, I suppose in one sense, interfere in that, for the want of a better word. But it is very much a relationship between the college, the institution, and the learner. And that's important for the personal learning. When it comes then to a bespoke program, where we deliver something like, as we have done in a few cases, we deliver a leadership program or some type of a skills program to the employees of an individual company or business. Well, then there are very simple contractual requirements that we have to meet with that client. And that is probably going to be more around the satisfaction level of participants in the program, the format and the style and the content of delivery. Because for any corporate client, we can't guarantee an academic outcome. We can't guarantee that anybody is going to learn anything on any courses that we run. It is as much a function of their capacity to learn as it is our capacity to teach. And we have to be very, very careful about that, because there's a whole integrity to the academic relationship that has to be maintained, because education cannot be bought. Access to education can be bought, but education cannot be bought. So there's a tricky balance to be managed there.
Great, thanks. Ellen, what about BI on that new market of B2B?
Well, we've been in this market for several years actually, and we're pretty big when it comes to the public sector actually in Norway. So we provide health management programs and school management programs, training the managers in the health sector and the school sector in management. So Andrew's reflections are really good. I think when it comes to the corporate market in Norway, this is where we see the most competitions from the really high from schools like INSEAD and Harvard. And in Norway, we don't really have those. We don't have that many businesses that are large enough to buy these kinds of programs, and the ones that are really prefer to go international, because that's something that most Norwegian businesses are targeting.
Okay, thanks, Ellen. So, Avi, do we have any questions from our audiences?
Yes, we do have time for a few questions. So these are both applicable to Ellen and Andrew, so you can just volunteer to answer as and when. Our first question is, does borderless higher education give you a strategic advantage in a post-COVID world?
Who wants to take it?
Maybe. And if it does, it gives the same advantage probably to everybody like us.
That's true.
So yes, I would think that in our case, there are many programs that we have that have a broader market because we're able to offer them online. That's kind of basic and to the point. But we haven't constructed those programs for overseas clients. They've been constructed for delivery in a physical place here in Dublin. But with some redevelopment, with some focus, we can and must really create some new online programs for overseas markets. So I certainly see that it does open opportunities for us. And I think for us, even though we're a relatively large provider here in the Irish market, we've got about 8,000 students. In the global market, we're tiny. So I think for us and organizations, higher education institutions like us, to develop our niches, to build on where we have strengths. We've got strengths in psychology, counseling, psychotherapy, then something completely different in analytics, in AI, of course, in general business as well. For us to build that content, build that capacity, and become renowned and have a reputation for high quality delivery in those areas could be very attractive internationally in an online way.
Perfect, thank you, Andrew. Aline, this might be one for you. 43% of students say that they prefer hybrid courses over traditional classroom or fully online delivery. Do you think that this is a trend that's here to stay, and how are you managing this at your school?
Yeah, yes, we see that this is a trend, and in terms of the lifelong learners, to call them that, they were actually the first who wanted to go back to campus after the pandemic. So they got here first. They were really concerned about coming here and getting that part of the learning experience. So I think this is a trend. And in terms of this, the last question, of course, the opportunities are there, but the competition also increases. And there's really no limit to how many students you can possibly have on these programs. So there's a risk of a sort of a winner takes it all. But of course, if you introduce hybrid elements, then that's a whole other story. So I think that hybrid is a trend here to stay. As we see it now.
Yeah. Andrew, back to you. What do you think needs to change in business education in general, or in your organisation in particular, to successfully drive business school growth?
I think a lot of the future is going to be around flexibility. So the learner wants flexibility, and we need to respond with agility. It was interesting there a few years ago, I was in Singapore. So I head up Dublin Business School, but we're part of a broader educational organization called Kaplan. And they've got a business, higher education business in Singapore. And I was visiting somebody there, it's probably about 5 years ago now. And we were talking about the use of educational technology and online delivery and so forth. And they've got quite a young student base. So the guy I was talking to was just talking about creating videos for learning, but they had to be no more than 8 minutes long. And I couldn't understand what's the 8 minutes. And I questioned him, what's the significance of the 8 minutes? And he said, oh, that's the average duration of the journey on the MRT, which is the railway, the underground in Singapore. And he said, a lot of our students, they will do their learning when they've nothing, there's nothing else that they can do. So on their phones, they will look at a video, and if it's no longer than 8 minutes, there's a good chance they're going to get it finished before they get off the MRT. So that was a very smart response to a flexibility that 5 years ago students in Singapore were looking for. So I think that's what there needs to be. And flexibility will manifest itself in many different ways. We've talked about hybrid, about online and on campus. So that definitely is one way. The other is around probably, maybe the stackability of small credentials, micro credentials. So if you want to do a master's program in something or other, why do you have to, maybe take a year full-time or 2 years part-time where you have to, study 2 or 3 nights a week over 4 semesters or something? Why couldn't you take a module for, a few weeks, complete it, and not do anything else maybe for another 3 months, and then do another 2 modules, complete them, and build up or stack up all of those micro credentials? That's another flexibility. Location then is another. So if I want to take, to complete an MBA, nice if I could do some of it from a college based in Dublin, some of it from a college based in Norway, and whatever other form it might take. So as long as that integrity piece that I mentioned earlier on, the academic integrity, as long as that is maintained, and as long as the quality assurance overlay is there, I think there needs to be a flexibility within all of that. And then the challenge is that we are agile in terms of how we construct programs, how we deliver programs, regulators who validate programs. In our case, we're not self-accrediting yet. We have a national regulator. So regulators need to be agile in terms of how they respond to this. And others then as well who input into that whole student experience and student journey need to have an agility as well.
Perfect, thank you so much. A question we've just had come in. With the progress and trend in online trainings, do you think it's really relevant financially and learnings from the programme to spend 2 years without working in a full-time programme whilst online or hybrid can help? Open to the floor.
Well, it's a good question, but what we see is in the youth market is of course that a bachelor isn't enough anymore. So we're not talking about 2 years, we're actually talking about 5 years. And it's a good question. I think it also depends on how employers view the value of education going forward.
Yeah, and was the question why take a block of a year or two instead of doing something part-time? Is that what the question was?
Yeah, is it relevant to spend 2 years without working in a full-time programme when you can do it online or hybrid?
My view on that, the direct answer to a direct question, is that my view would be do it online, do it hybrid. Because I think that when you're an adult learner and you want to acquire new knowledge or new skill, I think the best learning is done in parallel with work that you're doing. Now, there are exceptions to that, and the exception is where you're a school leaver and you're coming into your first experience of higher education. I think that needs to be full-time. And that's more than just about the subject matter, the discipline area. That's about all learning of the experience of higher education. But if we were talking about professional education, personally, I would be saying that it is best to continue working and do your course part-time or in hybrid format in parallel.
Okay, so I think it's so exciting to be on that industry nowadays, because it's a so movement and innovation industry so far. So we keep probably talking and asking during many hours. Unfortunately, we have to stuck to 1 hour slot maximum. So thank you very much, Ellen. Thank you very much, Andrew. I think it has been such an valuable insights from two relevant institutions that you implement lifelong learning project, a student success project, both of them. So we just pick one to another, but you both of them have implemented such an important project. So thank you very much for your time and for your insights. Hope that everybody has enjoyed. And let me move just with the last part. So just sharing with you that many resources have been shared on the text box. Meanwhile, we have been talking, but here we just have the last report about well-being that Andrew also mentioned, that it's a very important issue. So if you want, you can download it. And if you want to check a full demo about our education cloud, that it's a specific solution for higher education, you can do it. So great. So I don't want to invest more time, because I'm conscious we said 45 minutes and we are a bit over time. So thank you very much. I will insist on thanking personally to Ellen and to Andrew for their time and for sharing in that open way your knowledge and your experience that implementing those projects. And thank you very much. And if you like it, we are going to share that recording later on. So thank you very much, and see you in future webinar or roundtables. Thanks, Ellen, and thanks, Andrew. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.